We're going to start our celebration this evening by hearing from Wanda Pillow, who is Dean of the College of Humanities and the School of Social and Cultural Transformation. Wanda got her love of history from her mother and has been visiting Lewis and Clark expedition sites with friends and family for over 12 years. And so now we're going to hear more from Wanda. Thank you.
But where did York sleep? This question asked by my then 10-year-old son has changed the way I do research and how I think about American history. We were at Fort Clatsop, and he was especially excited to tour the fort because it's a full-size replica of the expedition's winter camp. We entered through the gateway into the fort and joined a tour. The tour guide was telling everyone where all the expedition members had slept. The 23 enlisted men in the bunkhouses, Lewis and Clark in the captain quarters, with the Charbonneau family room off of that. The guide even pointed out where Lewis's dog, who he brought on the expedition, slept. But York, an enslaved black man owned by Clark, was missing from this list. But where did York sleep? This question visibly disturbed the guide, and he stumbled around for a few minutes before responding, "We don't exactly know where he slept, but I'm sure he slept somewhere." Now, we were at Fort Clatsop because I, like perhaps some of you, am really interested in the 1804 through 1806 Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery expedition. It was commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson, who appointed Meriwether Lewis and William Clark with three primary charges: explore the newly acquired Louisiana Purchase, identify a potential east-west river trade route all the way to the Pacific, and form American relations with indigenous communities along the way. The expedition set out outside of St. Louis, and within 5 months made it to the first winter camp, Fort Mandan. And when the expedition left Fort Mandan in April 1805, it was with 3 new members of the expedition: Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian fur trader who would help with translation, and his captive servant, Sacagawea, who had just given birth 7 weeks before the departure in April. This party traveled the rest of the way to Fort Clatsop, the second winter camp, which is where my son and I had been touring. Now, during the expedition, Lewis and Clark and 3 enlisted men kept journals during the 28-month, 8,000-mile journey. And it is these journals that serve as the primary record of expedition scholarship. I have spent months, I'm going to be honest with you all, I have spent years in archives and libraries going over these primary records as well as interpretations of these records. I've also looked at 200 plus years of expedition popular culture, including best-selling novels, popular histories, film, and visiting tourism sites. And I found that by the time the first edition of the journals was published in 1898, the expedition had become known as an American Odyssey. It was an exemplar of American spirit and of American character. The expedition even made its way into the suffragette movement. In 1905, Susan B. Anthony unveiled the first statue of Sacagawea in Portland, Oregon. And during the 20th century, I cannot count the number of best-selling romance novels that have been published, creating a mythical love story between Clark and Sacagawea. And this was a predominant theme in the 1955 film Far Horizons, starring Charles Heston as Clark and Donna Reed as Sacagawea. Okay, thank you all. But common across my research has been a theme of York's absence. At times, he is completely erased from expedition history, or when included, is grossly misrepresented. And I began to ask if Lewis and Clark are American heroes who provide us with a national sense of pride and unity. Who is York in this narrative? And I was struggling to find York in the archive. York didn't leave any written records, And in these primary documents, he is mentioned less than 50 times. And 40 of those mentions are Clark simply saying, "My man York," or "my black slave." So that day at Fort Clatsop, when my son asked that question, I began to listen not only as a researcher, but as a mother. Because for my son and our family, "But where did York sleep?" isn't simply a rhetorical question. It is a question about who counts and who matters in American history. I realized that as a researcher, I had been focusing so much on York's absence and his misrepresentations, I forgot to sit with the knowledge that he was there every day and every night of the expedition. 851 days, 852 nights. So I returned to those archives and reread the primary documents, this time not looking for those 50 times that York is mentioned, but I started keeping detailed notes and records of geography and weather and clothing and food and sleeping conditions and illness. And I found by doing that, I could start inserting York into the expedition narratives and figure out where he was on any given day and what he was doing on any given day or night. So that also opened up some additional information we could know about York. And I'm going to share a few of those with you here. We know that York was 100% responsible for Clark's safety and well-being on the expedition. He prepared all of Clark's food, mended his clothing, set out the bedding, and took care of Clark when Clark was ill, which happened quite a bit on the expedition. We also know that York engaged in trade. He sent home a chest of furs to his family from Fort Mandan. And York had family. He had siblings. He had nieces and nephews, including 2 nephews who repeatedly attempted to escape slavery, and one who succeeded, making it to New York City and working as a printer, which provides evidence that at least some of York's family could read and write. We also know that after the expedition, York repeatedly asked for his freedom, a request that Clark denied for over 20 years, calling York uppity and ensuring that he was severely punished. I also know that York had a wife who he was devoted to, and this is a factual love story I look forward to telling one day. Now, I just want to assert that placing York into expedition history is American history. So, where did York sleep? This question is as pertinent today as it was when my son first asked it. In a world where doing African American history is being called divisive and un-American, we need narratives that accurately reflect American history, even the parts of it that we find difficult. My son's question comes with a responsibility to support this work and to do better. It also comes with a call to be curious and to care. And I hope it similarly inspires and challenges each of you.